Okay, guys, so I've been talking about operant conditioning. We just talked about positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. Now I want to talk about positive punishment and negative punishment. Um, Positive punishment definition: an event that follows a response and decreases its likelihood of occurring again. So basically, you're trying to suppress a response. Um, an example of that: let's say you have a cat, and the cat scratches your furniture. Well, you obviously don't want that to happen. Right? I know some people who will like take water bottles and spray their cats with them whenever they do something they're not supposed to. So let's say the cat scratches the furniture, you spray them with a water bottle. That stops the behavior. That's a positive punishment because you're adding in um, something that you're punishing the cat, obviously, yes, but you're also adding in like the punishment. So like you're adding in, the spray of the water bottle every time they were to go and try to scratch the furniture. So it'll be a positive punishment. You're adding something in. You're punishing them, but you're adding that punishment into it. So that would be a positive punishment. A negative punishment: removal of a positive reinforcer after a response is made. Let's say that you have a kid who's acting really bad, right? Um, and they just won't listen for anything. So as a punishment, you take away their toy. It's negative punishment because you're taking away something. So you take away their toy. That's a negative punishment. Whereas I used the example with the cat, and it's a positive punishment because you're adding in a punishment to it. You're adding something in, like with the water bottle, you're spraying the cat. Whereas with the kid and the toy, you're taking something away, so it's negative. So always, if you're ever looking at examples, remember, positive you add something in, negative you're taking something away. Um, so you've got that. Let's see. A few other terms here that I want to go over. One is called shaping, and that's whenever you model your response after somebody. So you see somebody do something, and you try to model your behavior after that. That's called shaping. Where somebody tries to teach you something and tries to teach you to do something a certain way, that's shaping because they're trying to make you model exactly right. I think you're trying to shape how their behavior is based on what you're trying to teach them. There's also schedules of reinforcement. This is one of my favorite parts. It's probably my favorite part of the chapter. But they're defined as rules or plans for determining which responses will be reinforced. So you have continuous and you have partial. Continuous means it happens every single time a behavior occurs. Partial means that it can happen every so often. Every so number of times. So like every third time somebody does something, or it happens like every 15 minutes. So schedule reinforcement, continuous and partial. And there are 4 types of schedules of reinforcement. The first schedule is a fixed ratio schedule, and I'll read the definition to you. An arrangement where a set number of correct responses must be made to get a reinforcer. So a fixed ratio. So let's go back to whenever I was using the rat and in the Skinner box, pushing the lever. A fixed ratio would be like if the rat had to push the lever 4 times to get the food or the water, excuse me. That would be a fixed ratio because you have to push it X amount of times to get the reward. The rat could, or let's say that the rat had to push it like 10 times. He could go and push it the 10th time and then keep going 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, but he's not going to get any more water until it's 10 more times after that. So that would be an example of fixed ratio. And there's a lot of these. I might actually post some examples. I might post some worksheets on there on Blackboard, excuse me, if I can remind myself to do it. Then you got fixed ratio, which is done every single time, sorry. It's defined by set number of times to get the reinforcement. Variable ratio, it varies. It's an arrangement where a varied number of correct responses must be made to get a reinforcer. So with variable ratio, you are varying whenever the person or the animal or whatever it might be gets the reinforcement. So, for example, a reinforcer is given after 3 to 7 correct responses. The actual number changes randomly. So let's say like you're asking somebody questions. Let's just do something simple, like a kid answering, doing spelling words. Say the first time they get 3 in a row right, then you might give them a piece of candy. The next time, they might go and they might have to answer 5 in a row. Then they might have to do 4 in a row next time. Then they might have to do 7 the next time. It just randomly changes. It doesn't matter. Also, you could use a slot machine as an example because you don't know how many times you'll have to play it to actually win. It's not set at a fixed ratio, it's variable. Some people play a slot machine for hours and finally win or don't even win. Some people barely play it 5 to 10 minutes and they win. So slot machine's another example of variable ratio. You have fixed ratio or fixed interval, which if you see the word interval, it always has to deal with time. So ratio, it always has to deal with an X number of responses. Interval, it always has to deal with time. So you see interval, you automatically know you're dealing with time. Or you see, like you read an example and you see it deals with time, it's interval. But fixed interval arrangement where a reinforcer is given only when a correct response is made after a set amount of time has passed since the last reinforced response. Responses made during the time interval are not reinforced. So let's say that trying to think of an easy, and I wish I had my list of examples because I have a bunch. Trying to think of them off the top of my head is a little tough. But fixed interval, let's say every 15 minutes, okay, I just thought of one. Okay, I'm going to use sports as an example. As far as like basketball goes, let's say like you have, in college you have 10-minute quarters. In women's college basketball you have 10-minute quarters. After every 5 minutes, of time that's run off the clock of actual gameplay, there's a timeout. Whether that's the media timeout after under 5 minutes or if it's a timeout between quarters. So like in women's college basketball, there are 4 10-minute quarters. Every 5 minutes of actual game time, not time that you're spent watching it or you're standing on the court, but after every 5 minutes the clock has run, it goes from 10 minutes to 5 minutes, you're going to have a timeout. Then it goes from 5 to 0 minutes between quarters, you're going to have a timeout. So that would be an example of that. Variable interval ratio or schedule. Variable interval schedule. Arrangement where a reinforcer is given for the correct response made after a varied amount of time has passed. Since the last responses made during the time interval are not enforced. So with this, you could use the example of somebody that goes fishing. They could sit there for 10 minutes and catch a fish. And then after they catch that first one, they could sit there for another 30 minutes and then they might catch a fish. It's not anything fixed. It's going to vary. It's just going to depend on, your luck, basically. So that would be an example of variable interval ratio. I did it again. Not variable interval ratio, variable interval schedule. So you've got fixed ratio, you got variable ratio, fixed interval, and variable interval. Again, I'm going to try to remind myself to put some examples up on worksheets up on Blackboard for you guys to look at. The last thing I want to talk about is Bandura. Albert Bandura, he did what was called a Bobo doll study, and here's the rundown of it. Children were put into a room with both kid toys and adult toys. They could not play with the adult toys, such as like the inflatable Bobo doll. And you should definitely go to YouTube and check this out because it's actually kind of funny. But they had all these toys, and one of them, the adult toys, was a giant inflatable doll, a Bobo doll, kind of like a clown. So they were told they couldn't play with it. But then, like, whenever the adults were in the room by themselves and the kids were watching them from a window, they observed the adult playing with the adult toys, including the Bobo doll. And the adult became very aggressive with it. The adult started beating it up, punching it, just like I said, being very aggressive with it. So the kids saw that. And so after the kids saw that, when the kid was left alone in that same room with the toys, most of the children, not all, but most of them, then imitated the adult's behavior. They were aggressive with the Bobo doll. They started hitting it and beating it up as well. And that showed that the children learned through observation. So when I talked about observational learning, this is an example, the Bobo doll study. The kids watched from outside the room when the adults were beating up the Bobo doll. And then when the kids were left there by themselves, most of them imitated the adults. Most of them emulated what the adults did. If you think about this, you can see this example as far as observational learning, imitation. When little kids try to imitate their older brothers or sisters, or want to do the same things that they do. I know I did that when I was a kid with my sister that's closest to me in age. So you can think of it in that way. But that's all there is. And again, I know that with that chapter, it's really hard to grasp a lot of it, not having a visual right in front of you, or me writing on a board showing you specifically this. But if you have any questions over it specifically, just please let me know, and I'll try to help you out however I can.